How's it going guys, Kris here with another Battlefield 5 weapon guide, and today we're going to be diving into the stats of one of the game's most iconic weapons, the M1928a1, a submachine gun for the medic class that can be unlocked and used after reaching medic rank 20. So the Thompson M1928a1, aka the Tommy gun, is one of the most recognisable weapons to feature in Battlefield 5. Early prototypes of the gun first arrived near around the end of the First World War, and it started to become a proper, marketable weapon in the early 1920s. Due to it being a bit of a pricey thing for the average buyer at the time due to post-war budget constraints, these early 1921 models didn't really sell very well. But as the years went on, the Thompson started to get more popular amongst Prohibition-era gangsters, along with the police that needed to take them on. This is where a lot of its infamy was reached, being the weapon that symbolised a lot of violence that went on in the 1920s and early 1930s, often being involved in big crime incidents at the time, like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Despite being popular for all the wrong reasons, the Thompson went on to be a much needed weapon a few years later, with the M1928a1 being officially adopted by the US Army in 1938, just before the start of the Second World War. And although the United States wouldn't go into the war until 1941, there were still a lot of M1928a1s being mass-produced to be shipped out and sold to other nations like Britain and France, who were in desperate need of supplies. This variant in particular fired the same 45 ACP round that all of the other models used, though unlike some of the later versions, such as the M1A1, the M1928a1 wasn't just limited to box magazines, being compatible with 50 round or rarer 100 round drum magazines. This might have given troops a bit more ammo to dispense, but they made the weapons bulkier, heavier, and more awkward to wield during combat. Not to mention that they also seem to rattle around a lot, hence why those later wartime production variants use stick mags only. Though despite being the lesser used variant amongst American soldiers during their time in the war, the M1928a1 was still the most produced variant of the lot, seeing service with many different nations' militaries, being a favourite for British commando units during their raids on occupied Europe. Anyway, time to delve into the M1928a1 stats and see how it compares with the other SMGs in Battlefield 5. Damage wise, it doesn't really do much different to a lot of the others, as that 45 ACP cartridge is going to be just about as powerful. The Thompson deals the maximum damage of 25 within close quarters up to 10 meters, and it's quickly going to slope off from here, rapidly losing power from this point, with bullet damage getting weaker and weaker the further they travel. The drop-off starts to level out a bit and get more gradual over those medium ranges, though it'll deal its minimum damage at 100 meters, only dishing out a total of 12 damage per shot. It's pretty rare you'll ever be facing anyone at these sorts of ranges, especially with it being an SMG, though it means that beyond 75 meters, it could take up to 9 bullets to bring someone down. It's going to be far more effective within shorter distances instead, killing in just 4 shots up to 10 meters. So just like most of the other submachine guns, the M1928a1's not exactly got brilliant range, being much deadlier within closer proximities. But one of the gun's biggest strengths lies with its ability to put lots of bullets down range quite quickly, as although it's not the fastest firing gun in the class, it can definitely be a bit of a pushover in CQC, providing you can land your shots. It's got a pretty swift fire rate of 720 RPM at standard, which is already faster than quite a lot of the other guns that deal similar or lower amounts of damage, giving it some very respectable kill times. Though with the light bolt spec, you can bump this up to an impressive 900 RPM, giving it an edge over the base version of the Suomi under the close range bullet hose. And in a short to range gunfight, there isn't really many other guns in the game that can match up with the M1928a1, having some of the nippiest kill speeds of the lot. Unfortunately for the Tommy gun, it may be a very dangerous weapon, but it's also played with some of the worst recoil stats in the medic class, pretty much having the highest vertical kick value of all the submachine guns of 0.86, causing your line of fire to drift upwards more so than others with prolonged fire. Because it kicks upwards so much, it can often be best to aim slightly lower than normal, especially if your opponent is further away, so that your line of fire drifts over your enemy's torso, sometimes kicking bullets into their face. It's a bit tricky to accurately land headshots in most scenarios, but if your target's within a close to medium range, aiming at their chest and tapping shots at them is usually the most effective way to take them down quickly, with that higher than average vertical kick often going into your favour. Horizontal recoil doesn't really get much better either, with the M1928a1 having a higher than average rightwards kick value of 0.33 and an even higher leftwards value of 0.47, forcing a lot of shots to stray off target. Because the leftwards value is stronger, your line of fire might sometimes seem to gravitate to the left a bit when firing in longer bursts, often impacting precision. And combined with the fact that the Thompson's also got one of the lowest bullet speeds in the class of just 330 meters per second, these factors make the gun even less useful against players in the distance, lowering accuracy even more and further limiting its effective range. Though despite the Tommy gun having a pretty cruddy set of recoil figures, it's often best to just let rip and hold down that trigger if the other guy's pretty close by, as accuracy is not going to be all that important in close quarters, because of the sheer amount of bullets you'll be spraying out in such a short time, which is pretty much where the gun's designed to be used anyway, excelling more so closer to the action. Most of the SMGs either have magazine sizes of around 20 or 30 rounds. Unluckily for the Thompson, it uses the less impressive amount of 20, giving it a smaller ammo capacity than a lot of the others, including some of the other fast-firing guns like the Type 2A and the MP28. This does match up with the Suomi though, which also has a base mag size of just 20 rounds too, giving it a similar sort of do-or-die, risk-reward kind of feel in close quarters, where you'll have a lot of power, but also be much more vulnerable when you're surrounded with a much smaller magazine. The gun gets even less reliable when you slap on that light bolt specialization, as that small number of shots you'll have will be spat out and discharged even quicker at a less manageable rate, resulting in more reloading often required in between every kill or two. Though thankfully, the M1928a1 does have some of the fastest reload speeds of the pack to make up for it, as although you'll be throwing yourself into a lot of sticky situations in CQC, you can switch those stick magazines over in just 2 seconds, if they're partially empty, and 2.95 seconds if they've been unloaded completely, neither of which being very bad times at all. But just like I mentioned earlier, the M1928a1's fully compatible with 50 round drum mags, with these being accessible in the game through the extended mag specialization. This not only makes the gun much more dependable, giving it over twice as much ammo at any given time, but it also now gives it the distinct advantage over a lot of the other SMGs, allowing you to keep on gunning within dangerous territory, fitting in well with the weapon's aggressive nature. These drum mags do take a bit longer to reload than the stick mags, costing you an extra third of a second, so there is a little bit of a trade-off to using them if you tend to reload out of habit, but they can often make the gun feel much more reliable for general use, letting you comfortably take on more players, or ensure a target's going to go down if they're a tad further away. Now, moving over to the specializations next. At the top of the tree, you'll find 2 options to slightly improve response times. Slings and swivels on the left, cutting down the deploy time after sprinting and allowing you to swap weapons quicker, and quick aim on the right, letting you aim down sights a little bit faster instead. With the M1928a1 having a lot of aggressive properties, and mainly being something you'd want to use for rushing enemy positions, I find that slings and swivels is usually going to be the better match, as you'll often be running around behind enemy lines, and you'll often be trying to get as close as you can to your targets before opening fire. So having that faster deploy speed to let you start shooting a bit sooner after sprinting is going to come in very handy. You'll often be able to bypass aiming down sights altogether in a lot of close range gunfights, simply by shooting from the hip. So quick aim probably won't be quite as useful if you're doing this and playing to the gun's strengths. Further down the tree, if you choose to go down the left side, you'll be able to max out the gun's lethality by boosting that fire rate with the light bolt, and improving hipfire spread with enhanced grips. On the right side however, you'll keep the base fire rate of the gun, but you'll instead be given one of those 50 round extended magazines, along with the custom stock, lowering ADS spread whilst moving around. Although it's very tempting to put the gun into overdrive and ramp up that fire rate, I find that it's usually more sensible to go down the right side instead, with the extended drum mag, as the gun will still be able to drop enemies reasonably quickly, but it'll leave you in less awkward positions, making it much more well-rounded overall. Equipping the light bolt and lowering hipfire spread isn't a bad thing to do, as it definitely caters to offensive tactics and makes it even easier to win one-on-one gunfights, so if you don't mind putting yourself at risk, then this is still a fine way to go. At this point in the spec tree, I tend to switch between both sides, but usually end up picking extended mags most of the time. Last of all, we've got the recoil buffer on the bottom left, reducing vertical recoil, and polished action on the bottom right, reducing spread increase while hip firing. Although the recoil buffer might seem like the go-to option for most people, with it having that really violent upwards kick value, I usually prefer to opt for the polished action instead, as a lot of the time, the added hipfire advantage is going to be more useful in close quarters, which goes well with the slings and swivels spec we picked earlier. The vertical kick might be high, but it can be countered in a lot of cases if you tap and burst fire, unless your target's really far away. But you probably shouldn't be taking them on anyway if they are. And because I often sacrifice the enhanced grip spec in favour of having extended magazines, at least the polished action spec helps to make hip fire more effective when it needs to be. So anyway, in conclusion, the M1928a1's designed to do exactly what a submachine gun should. It can put people down really quickly and effectively within close to early mid ranges, catering for aggressive playstyles and fitting into offensive tactics quite nicely. This is mainly all down to the gun having some of the nippiest fire rates in the class, while retaining a decent amount of damage, unlike some of the other SMGs that have similar or faster fire rates but dish out weaker amounts of damage per shot, usually needing more bullets to kill. Being such a powerful weapon doesn't come without its problems, because the Thompson's got some of the nastiest recoil values in the class, having more vertical kick than pretty much all of the others, but also kicking from side to side quite violently too, forcing a lot of shots to whiz off target. The further away your opponent is, the more this is likely to get in the way, lengthening kill times due to more shots missing. So although it might be able to shred people up in CQC, these high recoil values and low bullet speed are going to restrict its use against targets in the distance, making it a very ineffective thing to use, even more so than a lot of the other submachine guns. Most of the M1928a1's factors promote close quarter use, and although it might not seem like the most reliable weapon in the game, having some pretty small magazines, it's got some of the fastest reloads to compensate, or a much larger drum magazine should you choose it. So at least these should be able to keep you in the fight and allow you to do what you need to do while you're surrounded by enemies, camping objectives and playing to the gun's strengths, making it a more risk-reward weapon, or giving it some better well-rounded qualities for aggressive use, depending on your specialization choices. And overall, the M1928a1 can be a great weapon in the right scenario, being one of the more versatile offensive options available in the medic class, that'll suit gung-ho playstyles really well. So that's it for another one guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe and apply all notifications to be the first to see new content coming up in the future, and of course, thanks for watching. Take it easy, and I'll be seeing you in that next episode.